grimly charismatic Ness, the Untouchables two-parter boasted a semi-documentary style, roaring 20s nostalgia, and fast, violent action, with 30s media star Walter Winchell's rat-a-tat-tat narration perhaps the masterstroke. A much fictionalized Chicago mob was amplified by similarly fanciful episodes with Ness taking on such real-life criminals as Vincent Mad Dog Call, Dutch Schultz, Waxy Gordon, Legs Diamond, and Lucky Luciano. J. Edgar Hoover, never a fan of the real Ness, objected so much to the Untouchables' latter-day fame that he insisted the producers credit the FBI's work at the end of the Ma Barker episode. Capone himself, with Brandt reappearing, was again featured only in the two-part episode, The Big Train. The only other two-part The Untouchables episode, The Unhired Assassin, was loosely based on the assassination of Mayor Anton Cermak. That event also became the subject of my detective novel, True Detective, 1983. In the late 70s, while teaching mystery fiction at a community college, I happened to notice the Maltese Falcon's 1929 copyright, the year of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. That meant Sam Spade and Al Capone were contemporaries. Instead of Philip Marlowe meeting an Al Capone type, Al Capone could meet a Philip Marlowe type. In 1981, I set out to write a period private eye story around a real crime, the Cermak assassination. I sought the help of George Hagenauer, a Chicagoan whose knowledge of the city and its mob history was considerable. I said to George, "My private eye, offended by the rampant graft, will quit the Chicago PD." When he stopped laughing, George said, "Max, don't you know? You get on the PD for the rampant graft." In that exchange, Nathan Heller was born. Ever since, George has been my primary research associate on the Heller novels, as well as many other historical thrillers. With Heller, the approach is to research a famous unsolved or controversially solved crime, and when I'm ready to write the definitive work on the subject, I write a private eye novel instead. Early on, I had the idea of making Eliot Ness the honest law enforcement contact for my somewhat shady PI. Every private eye has a cop pal, after all. But I'd read in Fraley that Ness and the Untouchables had disbanded after Capone went to prison, with Ness gone from Chicago by 1933. The mandate of my novel was authenticity, so I abandoned the notion of using him. And then he turned up in the research. Ness was right there on the scene after two corrupt cops attempted the assassination of Frank Nitti, and into True Detective he went. Ness appears in a number of subsequent Heller novels as well, in particular The $1 Million Wound, 1986, Stolen Away, 1991, and Angel in Black, 2001. In 1986, I was asked by an editor to spin Ness off into his own novels, a good opportunity to explore his little-written-about years as public safety director in Cleveland. George and I made several trips to that city and explored the locations of potential Ness novels, from the castle-like boathouse on Clifton Lagoon where Eliot lived, to the dreary Kingsbury Run Gully where the serial-killing Mad Butcher pursued his homeless prey. Our research took us to the Cleveland Public Library, the City Hall Municipal Reference Library, and the Case Western Reserve Society, where the Ness papers reside. I expected to be disappointed. Noted mob expert Hank Messick's The Silent Syndicate, 1967, explored the Cleveland mob while disparaging Ness's gang-busting role. So when I found in the Case Western Reserve card catalog, remember those, an entry saying, Eliot Ness Scrapbook, I held out little hope. We'd already been there all afternoon, but asked to see the scrapbook anyway. A civil servant slogged off dutifully to answer our request. Near closing, the civil servant returned, pushing a hand truck laden with perhaps half a dozen huge scrapbooks, each many inches thick and large enough for a newspaper front page of the Era to be pasted in. George and I exchanged the same kind of dumbstruck look the original Untouchables broadcast had generated in me. Actually exploring this treasure trove find, apparently the last person to use the scrapbooks had been Oscar Fraley,